did you immediately move toward that idea of the Oriental medicine, or did you find that later? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, so I think at that point when I had just moved to the United States at age 19, I started gaining weight again. And I found myself addicted to foods and foods that are designed to be addicting, right? Like sugar. We lived right down the street from a Thai place, and I would drink their Thai tea with boba several times a week. And I found myself not knowing how to quit. I would eat all of those very addictive foods and find myself just wanting more of that. And so I discovered a book. It's called The Diet Cure by Julia Ross. And so it's about treating addiction from a biochemical aspect. And so she will recommend certain protocols of supplements for the person who stress eats, for example. And so because I was stress eating, or I was eating because I wanted this emotional shift, I knew that it was important for me to be able to restore my neurotransmitter levels so that I'm supporting my body in wanting, like, eating the foods that I wanted to eat, rather than just relying on this willpower that only lasts so much, right? And so that was my first discovery that made a huge breakthrough in my eating habits. I basically stopped craving very addictive foods. I stopped eating sugar, and I started going more heavy towards protein and whole foods for my daily consumption, right? And it wasn't later until I kind of still continued to struggle. I didn't completely take control of my eating, and I was drinking at that point heavily sometimes as a college student. And also I was living a very, very stressful life. I was working, and I was in school full time. I was supporting my family with their businesses. And so I found myself just exhausted all the time. And that's when I discovered Chinese medicine. I started reading books. I started implementing some of the things that I knew. I started taking supplements. I started taking Chinese herbs. And that's when my health turned around. That's when my fatigue started turning around. And so when I went to the doctor one day for chronic fatigue, and I was at that time on prescription meds, and I basically couldn't get out of this vicious cycle of relying on the meds to just get through the day, and relying on caffeine and Red Bull and coffee. I went to the doctor that day, and what he told me basically changed my life. He said, well, you have two options. You can either increase your medicine dosage, or we can add another one to it, right? And I went home that day, and I remember just feeling so defeated, because there was no way I could continue on that trajectory, right?
Yeah.
I just saw my life just going downhill. And so I made a decision that day that I'm going to just change my life. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't have a blueprint for how I'm going to heal my body, but something within me just told me that you can do it. There is a way. There are other people who have been able to heal themselves for all kinds of chronic conditions. And so I'm going to take that project on, because there's no other way, right? And so I was kind of forced at that moment to try out anything that I could try out.
Yeah.
And that's why I started reading and educating myself, and just trying out a bunch of things that then made a huge difference to my health.
So what is Chinese medicine, or you could say, Oriental medicine? What is that, the same thing, or are those different terms? And then what exactly is that?
Yes. So I have a degree in Oriental Medicine.
Okay.
And so generally it's a number of different modalities that are under that umbrella, right? So acupuncture, some techniques for tissue manipulation like tuina, some chiropractic like tissue manipulation techniques. There is nutrition. And there is Chinese herbs and some other ones like cupping, for example, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so that's basically the umbrella of Chinese medicine. I think Chinese medicine is a lot more specific than Eastern or Oriental medicine, that it incorporates mostly herbal medicine and some physical like acupuncture and tuina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we talk about acupuncture for a minute? Because
Sure.
I know nothing about it
Yeah.
other than that I've had a few friends that have done it and swear by it, and that's as far as I go. So acupuncture, what? It doesn't make sense to me. Why? Like from the little I know, I'm like
Yes.
I don't get it. So help me get it.
Yes. So there are different styles of acupuncture. The style that generally I practice was a very, I don't want to say scientific, but it was more black and white.
Okay.
So some acupuncturists are more in the energy healing space, and so they'll heal things like emotional issues and energy flow issues and so on. For me, that is not really my forte, and not what I generally believe in, and just not what I practice myself.
Sure.
But generally, what we're doing with acupuncture when I'm sticking, I should have brought some acupuncture needles and experimented on you
Ooh, that'd be
actually
fun.
today. But we could do acupressure. So basically, when I'm having pain on my right shoulder, for example, what I would, or somebody else, right? What I would do is I would stick a needle in order for me to be able to access the nervous tissue over here to make the pain go away within seconds of needle insertion. So I would use a mirroring technique. I would basically put needles into your opposite shoulder and the brain flips it, right? When we have a stroke affecting one side of the brain, it's the other motor function, the other side of the motor functions that are affected, right? So I'm tapping into that nervous system. So by putting needles into your opposite shoulder, I can affect the way your nervous system responds to that opposite shoulder. And so you should start to feel some pain relief in the affected side within seconds of needle insertion.
Wow. So okay, that actually makes a lot more sense. I've always kind of assumed it was more of a woo-woo kind of thing. Like,
Yes.
but it makes a lot more sense if you're explaining it that way. So, so I have like a lot of, well, not a lot, but I have quite a bit of lower back issues. Like I'm tall, I slouch all the time, so I'm always just kind of like sore. And then I do jujitsu, and that just messes me up. So how do they just poke needles into my lower back, and it's supposed to make me feel better? Is that the idea, or you go a lot? When you pull the needles out, does they just get bad again, or what is that like?
Yeah. So there are two aspects to back pain. There's the internal aspect, and then there's the external musculoskeletal aspect, right? So with acupuncture, specifically, I'm working with the musculoskeletal aspect. I'm also working with the internal stuff by stimulating circulation, right? So if I'm putting a needle directly into your back, what I'm doing is I'm creating micro injuries into the tissue. And the micro injury is going to basically recruit your body's innate ability to heal, your white blood cells, right? Oxygen. And it's going to send more healing force to that area so that the blood flow, your body can do the work.
Okay.
Right? And I can also treat it differently. I can also treat it through the nervous system. If I want to make your back pain go away within seconds of needle insertion, it most often works, but it doesn't work every single time. I could put needles into your large intestine channel, basically. It's basically just the blood vessel that goes through your large intestine organs, right? And so I could put needles into that area because from a nervous system standpoint, it corresponds to the areas of your low back. I could also use other areas such as the scalp, for example. Back here, this area will correspond to your low back, right? And so I'll put some needles in, and I'll ask you, hey, Brandon, how are you feeling now? How's the back? And you'll move around a little bit and you'll give me feedback. And based on that feedback, I will put more needles in or I'll change the location a little bit. The best approach, in my honest opinion, after doing acupuncture on thousands of patients, is to use an approach that will go after your nervous system. So basically putting needles here or on your hand and putting needles in locally, right? So that the tissue can heal from like both angles.